This will be the most corrupt election in the history of our country.
Welcome to The Real News. I'm Jess Lenore. The nation's focus is already shifting to the general election, but there are still important primaries taking place across the country where progressives had growing success this year in taking on the Democratic Party establishment.
Very strong showing for the progressive wing of Rhode Island's Democratic Party. Some longtime senators are out over in the House, some big upsets too, with some shakeups in leadership.
We were done with inside deals and sweetheart deals and the things that our state house had been known for.
This trend continued in deep blue Rhode Island, where the Rhode Island Political Cooperative, Working Families Party, Sunrise Movement, the Democratic Socialists of America helped progressive candidates defeat more than a dozen conservative Democrats who were backed by a party establishment known for opposing abortion rights and embracing neoliberalism. Candidates backed by Reclaim Rhode Island, a group inspired by the Bernie Sanders campaign, went 4 for 4 in their races. Well, we're joined by two organizers with Reclaim Rhode Island. Kinverly Ducoupe is a cultural co-director of Reclaim Rhode Island, co-chair of the Providence DSA, and field director for the campaign of Senator Sam Bell, who defeated his primary challenger. And Daniel Denver is co-chair of Reclaim Rhode Island and host of the Dig podcast from Jacobin. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us.
So, Kinverly, let's start with you. We know we were talking before we started this interview, and one of the establishment's top priorities in this race was defeating Sam Bell, and it's worth mentioning that the establishment endorsed a number of candidates who were not progressives this year. What message was sent to the Democratic Party establishment in Rhode Island, which is known for, as I mentioned, embracing, austerity, embracing neoliberalism, and things like opposing abortion rights in a deep blue state?
I mean, we sent a big message that the winds are changing here in Rhode Island. Senator Sam Bell was their top priority to take out, specifically because he was an unabashed progressive who would call them out and, vote against their bills and things of that sort. But he ended up winning with a landslide and beat his opponent with a 70% margin rate in her own backyard. This is just unheard of stuff, especially since the leadership here in Rhode Island is they've been very powerful for decades. So I'm sure this kind of took them by surprise, but it's, progressives are gaining power here in Rhode Island. And you either start, advocating for the people and being on behalf of Medicare for All, Green New Deal, $15 minimum wage, or you're going to get taken out. That's what it is.
And Daniel, so, the Democratic Party establishment has held a grip on the state of Rhode Island for the better half of this past century. And just in the last few years, really, we've seen a growing number of progressives win office. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, perhaps most famously. We've seen a number of big congressional races this year. People like Cori Bush in Missouri and Jamal Bowman in New York, taking off incumbents with decades of experience. Why do you think this message why do you think the message of progressive values is resonating so much with voters this year?
Well, those victories also have knock-on effects. It occurs to me that I think our youngest member, who is 18, if I have it right, was inspired to get involved in left progressive politics by AOC's example. But really, I think people in general and young people in particular just have to look around. The West Coast is on fire. We need a Green New Deal. COVID is massacring people in this country. We need Medicare for all. People don't have what they need to survive, and the private sector is not providing it. We need a state that takes care of people, that doesn't murder people. That's why we've seen mass uprisings this year. So I think across the board, in terms of economic justice, social justice, racial justice, environmental justice, that conditions are making it clear that the left has the only solutions that make sense to these just incredible problems that have become impossible to deny in this country.
So, Kimberly, we know that Reclaim Rhode Island and the DSA and other groups were canvassing during a pandemic and reaching voters, finding ways to connect with voters. Talk about the importance of that, and what lessons you learned just engaging with folks, and what kind of changes do ordinary folks want to see right now?
Well, when I was on the doors, like a lot of people were hesitant to like go and knock doors because it was a pandemic, and many thought like voters weren't going to be like open to having a conversation. But I found that nobody really refused to have a conversation with me during the pandemic.
Wanting to talk to people, right?
Yeah, many people were like excited to talk to me, wanted to basically have their opinions heard on what was going on. So people were eager to basically, hear out the candidates. But, we kept it safe, 6 feet apart, mask, always, hand sanitizer, gloves. But one of the things I had told like David Morales, which was one of the winning candidates, was that, the only way that a progressive candidate wins is canvassing. Like, there's no other way to do it. So we need to, do it as safely as we can, but we do need to get out on the doors. And I think that was part of the reason why, progressives won so big, because progressives were out on the doors, 24/7. The incumbents were doing lit drops.
Yeah, we had people. The Reclaim, we were knocking doors all over the place every weekend for all 4 of our candidates. The Rhode Island Political Cooperative and Sunrise and DSA were doing the same. And the establishment doesn't have people. And it turns out that politics is all about organizing people and convincing them that, yes, it does make a difference to get involved. And I think like we should emphasize that there's like a lot of caricatures about what kind of districts progressives and leftists can win in. Leonella Felix, a candidate that Reclaim worked very hard on her race alongside Rhode Island Working Families Party. She's a young progressive Dominican woman who won in a thoroughly white working class district in Pawtucket. Our ideas resonate all over the place. Leonella's victory in particular means that there's not a single legislator in Rhode Island. Okay, that's an exaggeration. That there are few legislators in Rhode Island who are safe from a progressive challenger, and they should all consider themselves, as they consider the budget right now, on notice.
And we know there's many states around the country, including right here in Maryland, where Democrats have a supermajority, but yet, are failing, in many people's opinion, to stand up to a Republican governor who has, not done enough, to stop evictions and to, just cut hazard pay for frontline union workers employed by the state. What lessons have you learned that you think other people, across the country should know about?
Well, I would say, Rhode Island is a one-party state. We're all Democrats across the board. Very, very few Republicans. Like, we always have supermajorities here, and that hasn't stopped. Like, that hasn't brought us or working class people here in Rhode Island anything of benefit. Like, it really matters what type of Democrat you are. That not all Democrats are the same. That a Democrat, who comes from their district and represents working class people, is a different Democrat from somebody who takes Wall Street money and, corporate money and, doesn't have an agenda that works for everyone, because they're mainly there for, careerist ambitions.
Yeah, our governor, Gina Raimondo, who's a Democrat, is a case in point. She endorsed Michael Bloomberg during the presidential primary. And though, she has done a good job managing the public health aspects of COVID compared to, the right-wing crazy governors we see out here. And yeah, it does, like, COVID has shown the benefit of just living in a plain blue state. But right now, what she's doing with the economic crisis is unconscionable. She is raiding funding for the poorest cities and towns in the state, seemingly illegally.
She's also wants like forcing schools to open up. Despite that, so once again, Rhode Island is a blue state, but our public schools are crumbling, like fungus all over the place, things broken that have never been fixed. And yet she wants hundreds of people to go into this building. Yet you can't have, a backyard party with 15 people because that will spread COVID, but you can have hundreds of people in a building that's not outfitted at all for any type of safety and is not, hasn't been cleaned properly or anything.
Yeah, and I think Rhode Island, the opportunity here at being a small one-party state, the numbers we needed to win these races are very small. And people elsewhere might say, so what, you're a small state? Well, we have 2 US senators, and those races have win numbers that are similar to a US House seat.
And so talk about what's next, because, securing these victories is just the first step. Laws are going to have to get passed. There's going to be coalitions that need to get built, in the State House next year. What's top on the agenda for Rhode Island progressives, and what's the plan to get that work accomplished?
I think one top priority is getting all the left orgs and progressive organizations in the state, especially those groups that worked so hard on these huge electoral successes, the Rhode Island Political Cooperative, Sunrise, DSA, WFP, Reclaim, all at a table together so that we can organize our electeds so that they can act as a progressive bloc in the state legislature. Because what we haven't just lacked progressives in quantity in terms of their quantity in the state legislature, but in terms of the quality of what sort of action they're taking, they haven't been cohesive and organized enough to stand up to leadership and to push a transformative agenda. So I think that's a top priority.
Totally agree with everything Daniel has said.
All right. We want to thank you both for joining us and, talking about this important victory. Like you said, Rhode Island might be a small state, but it's still an important state, and it still has 2 US senators, which, will be up for re-election, in the upcoming years. So there's still going to be a lot more to follow from Rhode Island. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And thank you to Kimberly and everyone in Reclaim who's put this organization together, and to all of our partner progressive orgs in Rhode Island for this huge victory.
And the people as well who delivered it.
Indeed.
And thank you for joining us at the Real News Network. And a reminder to our viewers, we're in the middle of a fundraising drive. If you enjoy, footage like this, talking to these guests from across the country, talking about progressive causes, progressive races, and, positive stories in these troubled times, go to therealnews.com and find out how you can donate today. Thank you so much for joining.